So, quick question. You know that guy Kareem from Subway Takes?
Oh, yeah, Kareem, yeah.
Was he on ACF last year?
Yeah, he was.
So it was him. Because I remember the host on my show, his name was Kareem.
Yep.
And he introduced me as Raj Biryani.
You just made me remember this, yes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that happened.
And then I'm watching Subway Takes. I'm like, for some reason, I don't like this guy.
You're like, that's the guy. Yeah, he did. Yeah, Raj Biryani. Yeah.
Okay, so that was him.
That was him.
Okay.
That was Kareem.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So now you have a reason to not. your spidey sense was correct.
Yeah, because I'm like, I love watching these clips, but for some reason, this guy's sit
getting
well
on my
with me.
nerves. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so funny.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Raj Against the Machine. We're here with a good old buddy of mine, Ed Pokropski.
Hey.
Also, who runs the Asian Comedy Festival, who's one of the runners of the Asian Comedy Festival, which has been going on for a few years now.
Yeah.
It's actually coming up here in a couple of days, so that's going to be exciting. Also runs a one-man show called Case 84 about his adoption.
Yep.
And he's been taking it all over the world. He just came back from Canada recently, and it's been running for a couple of years. So tell us a little about Case 84. I know I saw it once when you had me open for you in Philly. That was fun.
That was fun. And you know what? At that time, too, the show was a little bit different, and it was like I was still trying to figure out, like, a few things about it. So I think it was, it was awesome that you were able to open for me. But at that time, too, having, like, comedians open, and this is more of like a longer form narrative thing, I knew there was some like tricky like transitions that I was still working out. So it was like when you're figuring that stuff out, like building the plane while it's in the air, it was interesting in that process. But Case 84, and then the subtitle is Adopted in the USA. And again, it's just talking about myself being adopted and the idea of like a bunch of the questions that I get when people find out I'm adopted. I usually get the same questions, and I just use this show to kind of dissect them a little bit more, talk about how, we have been shaped by media and the types of adoptee stories that we see in media frame out like how we think about it. So that's why I get the same questions. So I do a lot of movie references, a lot of pop culture references to sort of frame exactly, why I get the questions that I do. So that's part of it. Right.
And it's so is it almost like, does it evolve show to show? Because I'm assuming you get different questions.
No, so the show itself, like the narrative structure of it is mostly the same, but I mean, I have changed it over time and it's evolved a little bit over time. But the questions that I've sort of focused in on and framed it around are the ones that I've gotten most consistently. It's not to say that like I haven't gotten other interesting questions along the way, but these are the ones that almost always show up when I have a conversation with a new person.
Right.
And those ones stay consistent. They definitely stay the whole time.
Well, give me an example. Like
So the first one is, did you always know you were adopted? That's like number one right off the top. And
which you probably
exactly. And also what's very specific is that, my parents are white. I'm a, transracial adoption. So I'm Korean and they are white. So visibly it's very clear that I am adopted. So that first question is the one that I always get. And again, the show, I use that to kind of dive in because it is, for me, and I'm sure for anyone that knows me or, thinks of adoption in that transracial way and thinks about it, oftentimes they think about it in a way of like white Western people adopting children from, other outside, of the U.S. or Australia or Canada countries. Usually I think that's one of the ideas that people have. That's one of the ideas they have in their mind. So again, for me, the idea of did you always know is kind of odd. And so I dive into it of why that's the perception of it. Yeah.
Have you ever just like fucked around with them and be like, I had no clue?
Right. I mean, I should. And I think I haven't fucked around with them in that regard, but certainly like early on when I was younger, more immature, I think I would make jokes or, more defense mechanism things or just say certain things that I felt like that I thought were sort of self-deprecating or funny at the time because I didn't want to explore it much. Not that I didn't want to, but also when you're having a quick conversation with someone, you don't really have the time to going
really,
deeper.
yeah.
So you just make a quick joke and then you move on. So yeah, so sometimes I've said stuff that has obviously not been true, but I've just been fucking around. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, what's the weirdest question you've ever got?
I do cover this in the show. It's like, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. And I have gotten the comment of, oh, that's so great. So aren't you glad you weren't aborted? Like your original birth mother didn't abort you. Like they turn it into a thing about abortion. And I've always found that as a very odd question, because technically you could ask that of anyone, but the fact that they're framed again, I understand.
I think it's personal.
It's personal, obviously, to them and their views, but then it's also like, again, I think this idea of, well, that would have been the only other option for a mother, for a parent, in what they perceive as must have been a terrible situation. So that's why they gave you up. Ergo, the only other option is it's either abortion or adoption. Very binary thinking in that regard. So from their perspective, they're saying, well, you didn't get aborted, so isn't that awesome? You got adopted. Lucky you. So that's not necessarily, again, it's not really a question. It's just them saying, like, aren't you happy that you're standing here?
Aren't you happy that you're alive?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which, again, you could technically say that if that is your agenda, you could technically say that to anyone.
To anyone. Yeah. Well, what was you just came back from Toronto? I think this morning?
On Monday we came back. I had a show on Saturday at a comedy bar. It was great, and it was
comedy bar at Danforth.
Comedy bar.
The one
Bloor
downtown?
Street, yeah, the downtown one, a little smaller, but still really nice. Amazing spot. And it was a great crowd. Whenever I go to a new city, I usually engage with if there's an adoptee community there, if there's a group, whether it's like formal and it's actually set up like a community group, or even if it's just small and it's just like a Facebook group and people kind of like hang out once in a while. No matter what, I usually try to find a group to engage with, so I can at least invite them out if they're willing and if they want to come, and that way it always feels like it feels good to be able to connect with them and share this story with them as well. So I was able to connect with a group called Asian Adoptees of Canada, and they helped me with finding a good location and a good time that worked for kind of their group and their members. It turned out really awesome. And it's funny because the show is so specific to me growing up in the US and America, there's things that I kind of talk about in some colloquialisms or some things that I mention that are very like American centric. And so like as the show takes shape, there's something I say about being, all American, so to speak.
Right.
And in the crowd, someone was like, Canadian too, or something, said something like, and Canadian. And it was funny because that was like the first time that I was like, oh, right, it doesn't, this part doesn't necessarily track in that same way,
right.
Which was, again, a great, and this is the stuff, and is like you only learn certain things by just getting out there and doing live and hearing like live feedback like that. And, so it was great in that regard. And I laughed and the crowd laughed and we took a moment and it was just like, that's the type of stuff you love and why you do things live.
Of course.
That's the reason why, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you're lucky that they were just like, and Canadians too, when you said America, because in Canada, they could just be like, go to hell, we hate you.
Well, and that's fair. And I did joke at the top, like I said, well, I picked a hell of a time to finally come to Canada, given our, the relations and stuff going on. And I mean, I think obviously I think that's clear that, the things that are going on, the tensions are based on governments and certain precedents and things like that. It's not, I think people know deep down, like your average, citizen is not trying to beef. And I think that when I came in with like, open arms and being like, I just want to share this show with you. Right. There wasn't, no one's going to be like, oh, thankfully they didn't just start throwing tomatoes at me at the stage. And
well, you're lucky. Because I didn't have the same experience when I was in Toronto last month.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Tell me, what was your experience?
Well, so I went to Toronto the day after he started the tariffs.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Well, I think he took them back since then, but I don't know.
Sure, a lot of stop starts.
Yeah, a lot of stop starts. But the day it started, I was in Toronto, and I did some stand-up at the Back Room Comedy Club.
Okay.
Back Door. back room, something.
Sure.
I was in it.
That's not okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I did a set there, and I went over my time, not by like much. I think I had 7 minutes. I did 10.
Okay.
Or 13. It wasn't crazy.
The number keeps going on. You're like, okay, I did my half hour, but what are you gonna do?
But the comic who went up after me. Okay, so here's the story. It was a 2-show night.
Okay.
My first show, I had a 10-minute spot. Everybody gets 7-minute spots, but they put me on as a headliner, and I did a 10-minute spot.
Okay, yeah.
So the second show, I was like, can you put me up top? Because I don't want to wait till the end. I got shit to do.
Got it, yeah.
So he was like, okay, cool. So then the show's about to start. He taps me. He's like, hey, your spot's now. You got to go run on stage. So I just run and I go do my 10 and I go over to 13. But then when I get off stage, I see my name on the paper. It said 7.
Oh, so in his mind, he thought early in the show meant
less time. But I thought, I already did 10, so I'm obviously doing 10 again.
No, totally. I feel you. Yeah.
So there was a miscommunication there. But then the comic who goes up after me, he goes, typical fucking American.
Oh.
Just taking whatever he wants without regards for anybody else. Fuck that guy. And then everybody started like getting weird because I actually had a really good set. They were on my side.
Yeah.
And this guy was like, he was supposed to do 10. He was supposed to do 7. He does 13. This fucking guy sucks. But what happened was because everybody was, liked my set, he just ruined his whole set.
Well, and this is the whole thing. Like, we could use a lot of metaphors, dig your own grave, whatever it is. Yeah. But like the thing that I think we forget in any like industry, comedy, whatever, is that your average person who's there just to have a good time does not know what's going on behind the scenes, does not know these ins and outs like, oh, he was supposed to get X amount of time and he went over. From their perspective, a comic just did a set.
I just saw a comedy set and it was great.
And unless someone there was already like waving you down or they were playing music or they were doing something that clearly, even if you didn't know, you could assume meant you were supposed to leave the stage and you didn't, then there's no reason to blow up anyone's spot. Yeah, and he just made himself look stupid. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but I don't know if that would have necessarily happened if it wasn't such a tense time in.
I think you're right. Yeah. I don't think that because I think also maybe he was, if we're giving this dude the benefit of the doubt and he was truly like legitimately annoyed just based on the overage.
Right.
I do think he was trying to capitalize and thought that he would get a little extra bump if he called you out and was being topical. I think he was trying to be topical.
Right.
And it just failed.
Yes, it failed miserably.
Yeah.
Poor guy. I felt bad for him.
Did he say something to you after?
No.
Okay.
No.
So he seemed kind of pissed.
Yeah, he did look furious. I didn't back down. I stayed there. I didn't like run away.
No, sure. Because you're American and we don't run. These colors don't run.
Yeah. I'll fuck a Canadian up. But he was like, he still looked like he was fuming when he got off stage. Like he wouldn't say what's up to me. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. And he would just hang out like at the other end of the room.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. 3 minutes. Come on.
Yeah.
People run the light all the time.
Well, yeah, especially again, if you did well, that would bode well for him. Crowd's warm. That's always what you want.
Exactly.
It'd be different if you went over and you absolutely tanked.
Which I still tell the story of. We'll name names. Remember Condabolu?
Sure.
At Unwashed?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good story.
I think I blacked out. I think I blacked it out of my memory. Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things like with, the show that I was doing and you were on multiple times and learning when you're new and you're producing comedy new and fresh and you're learning all these things and you're trying to like put people on and get big names and all that stuff you just never know like everyone's different style and what they're going to do. It's such a wild card. And like, someone going over who actually has some name recognition or clout, like you don't want to burn any bridges. You don't want and you also don't want to look like you're being the unreasonable one either. So it gets real awkward when people go ridiculously over, sure.
Ridiculously over, try to salvage a set, and they still don't at the end.
Oh, that's yes.
It's not a good
painful.
Look.
It's bad luck.
It's hard to watch.
Well, and it's really hard too. I mean, again, I'm not burdened with the idea of having a name that's like people have an expectation. So I do. That's the other thing is I have heard people like say like, oh, we went out to this amazing comedy night and so dropped in. Like it could be, they were at the Cellar and Chris Rock dropped in, someone iconic. And they're like, you know what? They weren't that good. And I'm like, okay, but like they were probably working on new stuff, which they were. But oftentimes people will judge a comic or a person by that one moment, one moment in time. And then especially if they're working on something new and it's like, okay, well, you saw their special. Right. You've seen them in the best possible circumstances. Yeah. And now you're surprised when they dropped into this club on a Tuesday night at 11 p.m. and they're not like knocking the doors off of it like in this one specific time, every single joke. Like what that's just how it goes.
Yeah. I think people fail to realize like a Tuesday night at 11 p.m. is not a Friday night at a comedy club.
Exactly.
Or like at a theater or an arena.
Yeah.
Tuesday night at 11 p.m. at a comedy club is a gym for these guys.
Yes. Yeah.
You're seeing people working out. You're not seeing them at the UFC competition,
Yeah. Well, and that's good. And you know what? This kind of brings me back to part of the reason that feels so good to be doing the structure of the show that I've been doing of like, because it's sort of like storytelling with comedic elements. One thing I feel good about is the fact that the expectation has shifted a little bit in that when people come, then they feel like they're going to, be entertained and hear a story, but they don't feel like they have to laugh constantly, or they don't come in with that expectation, okay, now make me laugh for this whole hour.
Right.
And then that way, when I've set it out as I feel like makes most sense and what I feel like the jokes hit best, then I feel like it hits better because now it's more natural instead of, the expectation when people come to some of these showcases is like, I better be rolling on the floor. I better be laughing at every other, couple of seconds. And it's like, that's crazy. Like, that's not how these things work.
Yeah.
Like you need a little bit of ebb and flow. So it's been really nice to do this version that feels a little bit more organic and natural for me in terms of my style. I mean, obviously we both know people who can just go and like, they just crush in their sleep somehow. And I don't know how they do it, but they just do it. So, that's great. And I think that's cool. But for people to assume that that's everyone's style and that everyone can do that all the time is a bit unrealistic.
It is unrealistic. But it's funny you mentioned that. I wanted to ask you. So like when we first met, we were both comics. You were doing stand-up comedy full time.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like shifted into this one-man show and do you do stand-up as much anymore?
I once in a while, like when people ask, and if I get asked a lot more to do hosting and MC stuff, which I love. Like I know some people don't really like it, and people are a little reluctant. I'm like, sure, if people want me to like host a basement show, like I'll do it. That's fine. I like hosting, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I was gonna say, do you find it? I guess do you still find the same? What's the word? Catharsis that you got from getting that laugh on a stage when you were telling jokes back when you were doing stand-up?
You mean with the show versus
stand-up?
The only thing I miss, one thing I really miss is like, trying out a new joke, tinkering with it, finding it, getting it, nailing. That whole process of new joke. It sucks. It's messy, but you're like, but there's something there, and I'm gonna stick with it, and I'm gonna ride this till it burns out. And you find it, and you get there. That feels amazing. That I don't think goes away. And with this show, there's less moments like that. Not again, things have changed, and I still find moments. I let it be a little bit flexible so it can breathe, so I can still find some moments while the show's happening. But most of it is scripted out or mapped out. Mm-hmm. So I don't have that opportunity as much to be like, oh, I had this observation. I had some stuff scribbled down in my notes. Let me try that out. This is what's going on topical. Let me see if I can find an interesting take on it. The process of that I do miss a lot. And like, again, when I do get asked to do a show here and there, it is nice and fun to go back to like, the stuff that I, whatever my 5 or 10 or whatever it is, that feels good. And then I throw in a few new ones and say, okay, that ate shit. Okay, fine. So that part I absolutely do miss. And I think it's probably the only thing that I go like, oh, maybe someday I'll get back into it. and punish myself again and try to do this. But and I think that's the part. You're right. I think the fact that you asked that question is right on, because God, that feels amazing when you find it and the crowd is just, and then when you can go and that becomes now a new fallback. In my back pocket, I know this always crushes.
Yeah.
When you have the arc and the evolution of a joke that does that, that is something.
It is the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't feel like it's completely gone with running your one man show, because you could probably, like you said, you kind of tweak as you go.
Absolutely. And I think that's like been, again, when I found those moments to be like, oh, I'll add this, that scratches that itch, and that definitely feels good. So yeah. And I think being able to do that, and so after the show, I'll usually do like a Q&A if there's time. And the questions and things that come up out of that still give me a little bit of a moment to riff, and that's nice too. So
right.
yeah, I feel like there's still opportunities. And like I said, if I'm getting the chance to do a hosting or MC gig, then then it's a touch a little bit more like crowd work. And sometimes I get a brief and I do have to write a few jokes or bits or whatever, just to kind of like keep the flow going. So I still get those moments, but certainly not like it was before, and certainly not someone like yourself who's like, working as a comedian like on a regular basis in many different rooms and in many different ways. So that part, if we're talking about it being like the gym, I'm rusty in that regard for sure.
Yeah, well, maybe rusty in that regard, but you are on.
It's like I'm doing mostly leg day, and my arms are like, or vice versa. Or whatever.
I was gonna say usually it's the other.
It's the other way around. Yeah, you're right. I've just always had strong legs, so that's why I thought I went straight to the legs.
But I mean, maybe I guess you're rusty in that aspect, but I think you are way making up for it by doing the show as often as you're doing it.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think stage time is stage time. And I do feel like comfortable. And I think that's why I continue to do the show, is because I'm like, being able to do this and feel like I'm getting better feels awesome. I think anything that anyone has in their life, whatever creative endeavor, hobby, it could be anything. But if you keep doing that because you feel like you're making some sort of gains. And I think that's what keeps me doing, is because I do feel like I'm not stagnant at the moment. So that feels good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of scratching that itch, I mean, you also help run the Asian Comedy Festival, which you started or co-started?
So it was co-started. Yeah, a few people. Yeah.
Yeah. Which you co-started what, like 2-3 years ago?
So actually, believe it or not, it was the tail end of 2019. We got it right in before COVID, because it was like Lunar New Year, was Chinese New Year time, like January. That was the first one in 2020. Stuff shut down, and then we did a digital version in 2021. So technically, we've been doing it now. This will be our 6th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is wild.
Yeah, it is wild, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I mean, the last few. I mean, every single one. It's always been so fun. But the last few that you've been doing at Sugar Mouse?
Sugar Mouse, yeah. It's a club here in New York City. It's down in like just around East Village. And I mean, it's Asian owned, and I think the idea of being able to maximize like as much help and support to, the AAPI community as we can at all levels. I mean, the fact that it's an AAPI owned, it's not a comedy club. It's like there's pool tables and there's ping pong. It's a bar, but they have a performance space, and we really kind of like, make the most and use of that space. And I think the fact that while it might not necessarily be built in the same way like some bigger, theaters and again, comedy spaces, I think the fact that it's a unique and interesting space, that's, you've done comedy in a barbershop, you've done comedy in like a fucking gym, probably,
a boxing ring.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
We'd do comedy anywhere. So I think just as long as you're setting up a cool, and especially in cities, I think if you're just setting up a cool experience, people will be like, oh, this is cool. They like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, yeah. I'm saying Sugar Mouse is freaking crazy cool.
Yeah.
Like the lights, you feel like you're in a spaceship.
Yeah, and I think that was exactly the vibe they're going for. So the owner will be pleased that it rang 100% clear and true. So yeah, I mean, I think I think it feels good that we can like mark it as our own, because yeah, I mean, it would make sense to have it at at a comedy. We've had it at comedy clubs before. We've had it at theaters before.
I think the first one I did, I think it was at the Pit.
Yeah, at the Pit. Yeah, and then we did it at Caveat. We've done it at Standup NY. So we've bounced around, but I think finding a consistent home always feels good. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other thing is like working with this place and this venue has been great because we're also like, we're not for profit. Like all of our proceeds, after we pay comics and do all that stuff, like go to a charity partner that we pick every year. So, they sort of understand that and they work with us so we can kind of maximize as much, in terms of like the split and all that stuff. Again, not to get too deep in the weeds, but just the idea of being able to, have as much left over to be able to donate to the charity partner is kind of our biggest like goal and win at the end.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. I've always been telling people like the ACF is a freaking vibe. Like it is.
And that's what we try. And it might, and that's the other thing is like, it feels like we keep bouncing back and forth between this, like, sometimes it's always, there's messy parts of it because it's live and it's a scrappy team. It's me and two other people. It's Kate and Yao. And we have we have volunteers and we have people that pitch in and help out. But the main crux of it all is usually, the three of us kind of just, rolling up our sleeves. But I think the fact that you feel that grit that we're trying to put into it and the fact that you say it's a vibe is exactly like what we're hoping for. We want it to be a vibe. Like we want it to feel like nothing else.
Yeah. Mission accomplished.
Well, good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so fun. Like all the Asian comics, primarily Asian, right? Mostly Asian, South Asian.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we always say it like, any sort of, we try to be clear about like, if you identify as, part of the AAPI community in some way, meaning like, if you're just like, I'm 20% this or that, what I mean? Like we try to be clear. We're not going to run a DNA test on it. We're not going to be like, you need to be this tall or this many, Asian heritage genes to,
photos
to
be
be
like,
considered.
You need to look like this.
Right. Yeah. Again, that's not what we're here to do. We're when people submit and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously if someone, came on and, in bad faith was not Asian American at all.
Right. Have you had that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Back when I did Unwashed sometimes, but I think that's because I was too coy about not Joe Coy, but I was too coy. I was too coy about the naming and like branding, which I guess is, people just thought it was a regular, like a cool comedy show. So I would have comics reach out and be like, yo, your show is hot. I heard it was good. Like, can I be on it? I'm like, yeah. I didn't know you were Asian, but yeah, sure. And they're like, oh shit, well, I'm not. And I was like, oh, well, kind of the vibe is like, it's like and for now, I was like, yeah, maybe we'll eventually mix it up and just sort of make it Asian leaning. But the whole idea was I was like, trying to do an all Asian show, and it was at a time where people were talking about whitewashing. So then I was trying to be like, this is unwashed. But what happened was people would just think it's like, oh, it's like a real dirty show. They thought it was like a real blue, like, oh, we can get raunchy show.
Some of them were.
I know. Well, no, and that's the thing is I think some people reached out just thinking like that was the vibe, that was the theme. And again, I think that was cool. And I never was just like, how dare you ask to take up space on the Asian. That wasn't it. I just was like, oh, well, thanks. And like, if I do a different show, if I do something else or mix this up with something like that would be awesome. Because it was always nice to have people ask. Like, that's nice.
Yeah, of course. It's super nice. Yeah. I'm not like that at all, though. If I see like a white person on an all Indian lineup, it fucks this guy.
Bums you out.
Yeah, yeah. Like, so going back to the Asian comedy festival and the Unwashed comedy shows and stuff. One thing I have noticed though with these old Asian crowds.
Oh, sure, give it to me. Yeah,
is that sometimes it takes a really long time to crack that shell to get that laugh out of them.
I've heard this feedback too. And I think it's tricky because, for some of them, it might be the first time that they've been to a comedy show. That's one, like there's one factor that could be happening. Another factor is this is maybe the first, especially the first time that they're going and the whole lineup is all, Asian Americans.
Right.
And now they're in this space that like, oh, this is, this is new territory, and what type of things are we going to hear? And I think also what happens sometimes is for the comics, I think the tricky part is they're so used to performing for crowds that that's not usually the case. So anything that they're sharing, they have to give all this extra context for. Whereas this, the tone shifts. Now you don't have to give as much context. So there's always this tone shift of like how to kind of like move that around. And I think what happens when those dead spaces is what is the comics like trying to give that extra background, and the crowd's like, yeah, we know.
We already know.
Of course we know. Now it gets to the thing. And and the only reason I say that is because we see all the different submissions. So we see a lot of the same, material, framework, setup, like a lot of the same type of thing. And that's only because so many of these comics might be doing this in isolation, again, where they may be the only one or two Asian comics on a show.
But then it sets it up for the rest of the show.
Exactly. So now you're on the show where like, oh, your joke about being, mixed or, looking a certain way, or like, you're a strict parent or something. The person right behind you is about to do the same thing, or the person right before you just did.
Right.
So now that can also cause a little bit of a shift in a tone thing. So I think that all of that is, while maybe awkward like in a moment, we're better for it eventually. Like as we find our legs within the show itself, I even mean. But I have seen that happen, and that's my assumption of what is happening.
Right.
But yes, there could be this idea. Like, I think there's a lot of like young professionals that come to see the show too. So again, if like they're a little bit more in a more professional setting, usually, although sometimes those groups the rowdiest.
Yeah, exactly.
And they want the like raunchy stuff. So yeah, you just never know how a crowd is going to, especially in this case.
Right.
But you're right. I have seen this, and I've heard it from other comics like come off and be like, woo, that was a tough crowd.
That was a tough crowd.
They were tight. Yeah. So I think it's like, that is why I do like the chance when I'm able to be the host or the MC of certain sets, of certain time slots, because I know I know the crowd. I know how to kind of like maybe shake them a little bit first.
Right.
And maybe even if I'm setting up something, or I know the lineup, and I sort of like tailor some initial comments to lean that way, I think that's helpful. And I think, sometimes I'm not always the host. And again, we don't want to make other hosts like change their style.
Right.
But I think when I'm able to do that, I think that helps a little bit.
No, I think so. Yeah, I definitely, I always prefer doing the shows where you're hosting, because I feel like you know how to really lube them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the best compliments I've ever got. Well, yeah, and I think it's like, it's nice to feel an atmosphere of like, any shows like this is like, do people feel like they want to be there? Do they feel present? Do they feel like they're engaged? Are they listening? And that's why I always try to go up on the stage with that mindset, because then people feel like, well, if this guy gives a shit, then I probably should give a shit. And if this guy cares about the next comic, I should probably care about the next comic.
Right.
I think that's having that energy and that vibe, which just, that's what I do feel that it's not a put on. So that's why I feel like I want it to radiate out. I want people to feel that and then give it back when the comic comes on stage.
For sure.
Yeah.
Which is what makes you such a good host, because you innately have that desire to set the show up that way.
Yeah. And again, I'm not there to try my new joke. Like I might like tell a joke if like I feel like there's a lull and I need to like level set, sure. But if like everything's hot, like I'm not stopping that train.
Right.
I'm like, well, let's keep it going.
Exactly.
Last thing, and you've been on these shows like too, is like when a host is like trying to like now take that over.
Yeah.
It's like, woof, no.
Get out of here, man. What are you doing?
Do it on the other next show when you're on, great, fine. But like here, we got a thing going. Like don't take the oxygen out of that. Just go. Let it go. Like
let it go.
Let it burn.
Yeah. So, quick question. You know that guy Kareem from Subway Takes?
Oh yeah, Kareem. Yeah.
Was he on ACF last year?
Yeah, he was.
So it was him.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember the host on my show, his name was Kareem.
Yep.
And he introduced me as Raj Biryani.
You just made me remember this. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
that happened.
And then I'm watching Subway Takes. I'm like, for some reason, I don't like this guy.
You're like, that's the guy. Yeah, he did. Yeah, Raj Birani. Yeah.
Okay, so that was him.
That was him.
Okay.
That was
All
Korean.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So now you have a reason to not. your spidey sense was correct.
Yeah, because I'm like, I love watching these clips, but for some reason, this guy's sit
getting
well
on my
with me.
nerves. Yeah. Oh wow, that's so funny.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
Yeah.
But going back to the ACF and kind of figuring out what really works for the audience, it's funny that you mentioned that. Like a lot of these comics will really give them the backstory to a lot of these jokes, which this crowd already knows.
Right.
And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I feel like the reason I've had successful sets at your show is because I don't do that.
Right.
I go up and I talk to them. First of all, I don't even acknowledge the fact that I'm Indian. I just talk about the fact that I'm just a regular guy that has these regular problems.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah.
And it's been doing really well, at least the last couple ones, because I feel like the audience has definitely evolved over time.
Yeah.
But initially, I did get a little annoyed because I would take the same approach and I would get nothing. But then, some Asian comics would go up after me, and then
really
they would do
lay it on
hackiest, like talk about the eyes, and like they would do the hackiest shit, and they'd be killing it.
Sure.
And I'm like, what am I being gaslit right now?
I think that's very sure. I get exactly what you mean and what you're saying, and I think this is a great thing to show that as any group is, we're not one thing. We're not always gonna vibe on exactly the same thing. It is interesting how some crowds are like that, where they're I've seen some crowds turn on that hacky vibe and be like, oh, grown, here we go again. And they do want to just see someone just exist as an Asian American person and just talk about whatever it is. If it happens to be the Asian American experience, fine, great. But yeah, when it's too hacky, then they're just like, oh, here we go. And you're right. Then I've seen it swing the other way. And they're like, yes, more impressions, more, yes. And I think so one perfect example is I am often baffled by Uncle Roger. Mm-hmm. I think Uncle Roger is a great example of someone who I scratch my head at sometimes and go should I like this guy? The thing that bothers me about him, oddly enough, is that his initial conceit and his initial idea around everything was he's Jamie Oliver is white and he's making this Asian dish and he's doing it badly. Mm-hmm. Rachel Ray is white, she's making an Asian dish, she's doing it badly.
Doing it badly, yeah.
And he's like, here's how you're supposed to do it. And I get where he's coming from, and he's from an Asian person, I get it. One, he starts that he needs to make content, so it's going to balloon out. And now he's talking about any Asian dish. He has now become the de facto expert of.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, but you're not every single Asian. You're not Korean, so how could you talk about this one? And you're not Taiwan, so how could you talk about that one? But now he's doing this weird thing where it's well, why do you think people are oh, you're Asian, so you should know this type of food? And it's well, not necessarily. And he's kind of playing into, I'm assuming he knows that he is, and that's kind of the point.
Right.
But sometimes it's the reason he's so popular is he's putting on this persona and this thing. And I'm always is that a good thing? I don't know. I go back and forth.
Right.
But the other thing is that kind of makes me annoyed, not from an Asian American perspective, but more just from a person.
Yeah.
Is that this is part of the issue with YouTube, social media, content in general, is that did Uncle Roger go to culinary school? What credentials does he have as a cook?
Besides
even just as a home, just the fact that he's Asian. Mm-hmm. And if he did have other credentials that I don't know about, fine. And I'm not saying you need to be a Michelin star chef to talk about food. Obviously not.
Yeah.
I just mean he's talking shit on people who have dedicated their lives and have a pretty good experience in food.
Mm-hmm. Professional
people doing food. Mm-hmm. And while I understand that they might get things wrong and they shouldn't be oh, I'm an expert at X type of cuisine.
Right.
Take all the other things away from it. We see that happen all the time where people now think they're a doctor. everyone thinks they're a lawyer. Everyone thinks they're an expert in some other thing just because they've studied it in some way casually to whatever extent we don't know.
Right.
So that type of thing that Uncle Roger, the character, does just feeds into that idea of like, oh, you know, these idiots don't know what they're doing. Oh, school doesn't mean anything. And all the experience that you put into and all the things you did to try to like learn how to be a cook. Fuck that. I just know it because of this. And I watched a bunch of YouTube clips. So I'm an expert too. And I should be able to talk shit.
Yeah.
And while again, I know for most people, like you would say, well, it's just a comedy YouTube page. He's not, there's just as many people that take him seriously for his word and as a person to de facto say like Uncle Roger's an expert on X. And that's not to say I've watched his videos and he does know what he's talking about in some cases in terms of like, you know, that techniques. And I'm not to say that he shouldn't be, you know, considered an expert in some regard.
Sure.
But it's just interesting to me that he's part of this cohort and this idea, like, I'll just go and talk shit, whatever, you know? Yeah. So that's the part that kind of like makes me go, how do I feel about Uncle Roger?
Right. That's how I feel about Dave Portnoy.
There you go. Great. Perfect example. Yeah. And again, what qualifications does Dave Portnoy have? Just that he's eating a lot of pizza.
Yeah, he's eating a lot of pizza.
Cool.
Yeah. Like he's just as qualified as every person in New York City.
Exactly. And again, lightning in a bottle, you just keep doing it. And again, it's not to say that he isn't qualified either, but you're right. It's like, what has he done that he should be able to hold this power over these small businesses and be able to walk in and just, you know, and now they have to kowtow. And again, their product is their product.
Right.
And while if he's doing it just for the sake of like, you know, it's for fun and like, you know, here's what you can know about this type of pizza, but it's the fact that it's grown so much that he puts a value on it and people follow that value like scripture.
Yeah. Yeah. I think pizza places have even gone out of business because of a bad review of his.
Exactly. Yeah. And to me, that's a bad press. That's a bad thing to be happening. And again, you can have your opinion about pizza and service and like, you know, but it's like most of the time it's like these people aren't trying to like pull the wool over your eyes, guys. Big pizza isn't like trying to fuck you over. Like they're just trying to make a living and make, you know, pizza is, there's a wide range of it. And
it's like subjective. Like it's the taste is in the mouth of the beholder. You know?
Exactly. There you go. Yeah. And I just, exactly. And I do think when we get to the stage where people are, again, not seeing it as casual and as a joke, as funny as like Uncle Roger could and should be taken as entertainment, casual, funny, great, fine, yes. But when we start putting up the Uncle Rogers and the Dave Portnoys as just like biblical figures, scripture on these certain things, and they wield this much power, that's when I'm like, okay, guys, we've gone a little bit too far. Can we just pump the brakes? Can we chill out a little bit on these guys?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like stereotypes are there. They're funny.
Yeah.
You can make fun of them. But I feel like we should stop. Well, I guess, what's the point of perpetuating them, though? What's the point of continuing them? You know?
Well, I think, okay, so for devil's advocate on the side of perpetuating, I think the idea of a stereotype is if it's a thing that exists that's true, it's only been made a stereotype or demonized by a certain group, and people still, that is their lived experience and lived truth. And we should be allowed to let that be and live without the weight of a stereotype on it. So even the idea of like putting that out there in a hyper way, like Uncle Roger does, when you put it out there in a hyper way, I think the idea is supposed to be to normalize it so that we just see it as another shade of life, and we don't tease it. We don't think it's bad. We don't use it as a stereotype or say this is a bad thing. We just say this is a thing that exists, and then we just keep sort of like maybe desensitizing ourselves to it, and then we're able to move on from it and say, and look back and either forget it, that it was even a stereotype or a thing, or it's just become so normalized that it doesn't really, it just sort of like well, whatever.
Right.
I think if I had to say, like, that's probably in the side of saying this is why we still have them, why some people use them, and why some people would say, but they're not bad. Yes, we call them stereotypes, but if that's part of someone's personality, being whatever persona,
then it's valid.
Then it's okay. Yeah, that line probably gets blurred when someone is putting it on just for the sake of a cheap laugh.
Right.
But the hard part is we can never know people's true intentions. And then if you could potentially like raise a good faith issue, and someone would be like, well, you're just perpetuating the opposite
Right.
So
yeah.
Again, I would like to give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that this is all the thoughts, this is all the things that they have considered within the process, but that's probably not the case. But
yeah, I doubt it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think, like, the same way pizza, so is comedy. Comedy and pizza are subjective. And yeah, I don't want to necessarily say, like, oh, just because you're laughing at the hacky stereotype, you don't know comedy and you're bad and you're wrong. I don't want to say that. What you like, and if you're laughing at it, great.
Oh, I'm saying that.
You're saying, yeah.
I'm 100% saying
right.
that.
But I don't know how to. I guess what I mean to say is, like, I don't know exactly what the answer is and how to, like, find what the balance is, I should say. And again, that's not what I would do. But again, I would hate for things to be too homogenous either. But
right.
Yeah, but yeah, there are certain things that I absolutely will cringe at. And there's, we get certain submissions for the fest that are like that, are hacky and bad. And we're like, we really try and say, like, is there something going, are they trying to make a commentary? And if we're watching, we're like, I don't think they're making a commentary. I think they're just doing a hacky thing. Then we're like, okay, well, it's not really our vibe. Maybe it's someone else's vibe, and maybe it's a different festival's vibe. Great. But for this, again, we're not trying to put a value judgment on.
Right.
We're merely saying, for the vibe and for the style that we're going for, this does not fall within that. Sure. There's been plenty of things that have rides the line. Again, if you can at least see some intentionality in it, then I'm like, okay, great. It might not be my thing, but it seems like there's an acknowledgement and a self-awareness of what is being done at the moment. And there's another level to what's being done. Right.
Yeah. It's got to be layered. It's got to have some substance. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Layers is great. Yeah. And I think if there's multiple layers, then you can at least go, oh, there's some stuff going on here. If it's just a single layer, then you're like, well, I guess that's all I have to go on. That's all I can judge.
Right. Speaking of submissions, though, how many do you typically get every year?
I mean, this year, so this was the first year we're bi-coastal. We're going to do an LA leg of it. We're going to do an LA. So New York City, May 6th through 8th, LA, May 27th. And, we opened it up. We always open it up to the whole country and just, say, you got to get to New York.
Right.
But this year we got like almost 200, over 200 submissions.
Whoa.
In the beginning, it was like, I think we got maybe 60 submissions, maybe close to 80.
Okay.
And then it grew, and then it was like, and then we hit 100, and then we hit over 100, and now it's like, oh my God, this is a lot of submissions.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's great. Yeah. That's really great. And I think that feels good. It feels like people, like the community is growing and people are trying. I do think there's still like a perception like, oh, Asian Comedy Fest is probably pretty small, and like I'll just submit and there'll be, and it's like we don't have that many slots anymore, and now we have a lot of more submissions.
Yeah.
So the competition has gotten bigger, and it does feel like where we were able to put more people on in the beginning, it starts to the point where we're able to put on less and less and less.
Right.
So it always feels bad because there's people that are sort of like in the maybe column that we're like, oh, there's space maybe, and we have discussions about it. We're trying to figure it out. And their styles fit here. Does their style fit there? And I know what it's like to be on the other end when you get rejected from something, and you're like, what the fuck? What's wrong with me? What do I need to do? What do I need to shift or change? And especially when it's something that maybe you've submitted to multiple years in a row, and that's something I know people do and that I've done. And yeah, it can be a bummer, and that sucks when you're trying to put on something to build community and build good feeling and all this stuff, but there's only so many spaces and slots.
Right.
But I always hope people who are doing it continue to do it and feel encouraged and feel like they continue to do their shows and do all the work and then come back and eventually, it's the right time and right position and right place. But then also like, yeah, there's sometimes I also feel like when we are able to bring on someone new and they have made it, it feels good and the comic feels good about it. I hate to have people come on and think, oh, I just made it on because I'm an Asian comic and whatever. Right. I feel like we've reached a level now. I mean, we're still small, but I think we've reached a level and a good reputation now where when someone gets accepted, it's not like a small thing.
No, it's a huge
thing.
Yeah,
and I hope that people feel that way, especially when they're, when they're getting their credits and they're going, to the the Laughing Skulls and the Boston Comedy, to if they're doing the comedy festival circuit, I'm hoping ours is one that is, coveted as well eventually. Yeah.
Well, it definitely is. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, because I know a couple of comics who've been trying to get in for
that
years.
Aren't none too, well, that's fair.
None too pleased.
Yeah.
But also, they don't deserve it. No, I'm joking.
No, I know.
I'm not going to name names, but he sent me a buddy of mine sent me a rejection letter from ACF. I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and he was like, "What the fuck, dude? This is like my 4th year in a row."
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I was like, I think it's a you problem at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the hardest part is that like, here's the other thing is style is so specific too. Is like, again, not to get too in the weeds about behind the scenes, but like, it's when you're trying to build out different lineups, and again, sometimes people's own style in a different context, in a different situation might work, but maybe there's more like dry humor comics and there's more, low energy, but really funny, but low energy. And we already have like, we've already booked our amount of like that style.
Right.
And maybe there's some people that are more personality driven. They're more based on their own experience. And then there's maybe some more people that are more topical people. And it just so happens, it was between these two topical people and it was neck and neck. And we had to go with the other one. And so that's the other thing is too, is like, I try to think and I try to tell myself too, when I'm on the receiving end and getting rejected, it's like, okay, so maybe I was just, it wasn't, they had, this many of this type and it just wasn't my time this time.
Right.
But I get it. When you do it multiple times in a row and you keep getting the no, and the rejection, that sucks. And it's hard not to think like, well, what the hell am I even doing? So, yeah.
But I will say it is nice to know that you guys literally go through every single submission and then you even break it down into different categories of like who's the better option for this category. I don't think a lot of festivals do that. I mean, they go through their submissions, but the fact that you guys even take it to the next level and really tailor this festival.
I think that's like what we hope people are getting from. We hope the audiences are seeing that or feeling that when they're there. Or even just seeing it from the marketing materials and seeing like, oh, this, if they have an idea of some of the comics, they can get a sense for what the shows are going to be like. And I think the idea of being able to put people on with like different sensibilities that still kind of like fit within a certain vibe, makes a show just flow a whole lot better. And I think what's good is when we, look at them, like we all have kind of different like tastes in comedy too, and that's also good because it would suck if all of us had the same. Then it would feel like there have been plenty of times we've gotten into disagreements and where two people will be on one side and one person will be like, nah, no, definitely not.
Right.
Or vice versa. It's like two people have been like, someone has been saved by one single person because they're like, I'll go to bat for this person.
Oh.
You two might not be on their corner, but like I'm going to use, not that we have like a whole specific system, but it's like, veto power or their save, whatever you want to call it. That's happened too, where someone's been like, trust me, if they bomb, whatever, you can blame me. But I think from what we see, I'm like, look, Raj Birani is trust me, he's solid, guys. And the people will, and I do think that's great. And I think that makes for a good mix of comics. And again, there have been people that we thought like maybe they're not exactly completely ready, but they're good and there's something there. Mm-hmm. And we want to give some comics like that shot to be able to like rise to the occasion and then springboard and get that confidence to then go on to the next thing.
Right.
And that too is part of the, we've gotten people who like in their thing will be like, I've got 100K followers. I've been on this thing. I've been on that thing. I've been on the other thing. Blah, blah, blah. And you watch the thing, you're like, oh yeah, they're pretty good.
They're there.
But I think they think like, from and I understand that you want to, and that makes sense. And that's not to say that wouldn't be a factor, but you're like, it's not exactly right for this now. Mm-hmm. And those social media followings and those numbers, they often mean nothing.
Yeah, they mean nothing. It's not like
it's not like booked shows before.
Yeah. Those high social media numbers, they don't fill seats. They don't translate to seats.
Yeah, only certain people those numbers do. That's not. I would say 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. Just it's not a math equation. It's not this A plus this B equals this. Mm. It's not like that. Just because you have X amount of followers does not mean those followers are in a certain area engaged enough to buy tickets to a show.
Correct.
That's a totally different number and like a algorithmic thing that you just can't do by 100K followers. You just, that number technically means nothing.
That means
anymore.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah. I used to work with this one comic who had over 100K followers. And he was like, I'm headlining a show, come open for me. When I got there, he had to call it. Two people showed up.
It's so hard. And I think that's the thing is like, there's so many factors going on beyond just behind those numbers, but and then the idea of getting someone to come out to a live show. Mm-hmm. And, we face it all the time too. It's like, we're busting our butts for marketing and getting the word out. And we have multiple, people essentially comics that are pushing it out there too, but everyone struggles to put butts in the seats, especially now in this economy, So like, I think you can't rely on just followers and impressions or whatever alone. There's so many other things that have to come into it. And yes, I get it. You want to put as many things as you can in the plus column as possible. Totally get that. And God, I don't have 100K followers. I only have 10K. I don't even have 10K. So like I can't talk to that. I don't know how, whatever it is. But I just mean to say that's not a golden ticket. That's not going to just tip the scales. We don't do a search and filter of like, of who's got 100K followers or more. And, they're definitely on. Don't even watch their tape. They're in.
Right.
That's just not how it works.
Yeah. Well, the takeaway from that is ACF has integrity.
Sure. I hope that's one of the takeaways of that. Yeah.
Because if I was running it, I'd put all those 100K people up top, make sure their fans stay till the end. And then, they suck at the top, and then you put the good talent at the bottom.
You'd be like, you know what? One of them's got to hit. Out of these 300K, 300K people, one of them's got to bring in some people. Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair.
I mean, that's the formula every comedy club in New York City uses right now.
Absolutely. That's true. And again, I'm not saying it probably works in many regards, but like,
it doesn't work for retention.
Sure.
It works for maybe 1 or 2 shows, but then when they go to the shows and they're disappointed by the fact that this person is just an Instagram person, they're not a comedian.
Yeah.
Then you don't get that. You don't get those people coming back for more.
And I think that's the thing is retention's a great way to put it. And I think we're trying to retention and a reputation. It's like we're trying to build a good rep for, good shows, good solid performers. And again, like intention and thought behind these lineups, behind the festival. And we want to, let people know that it's like this, it's not rink-a-dink. Like we are putting real work and real thought behind this. So when you come out, like you'll have a good experience. Like, again, can I say everyone's gonna crush that night? It's gonna be the funniest thing you've ever seen. Like, no show can say that, you know,
right.
but you can say like you're gonna have a good time, like that for sure. You're gonna be entertained and you're gonna have a good time in some regard for sure.
Yeah. And that's a testament to the ACF ever since I've started going is regardless of, you know, sometimes the sets are hits or misses, but
Sure.
at the end of the night, everybody's just having a blast. And it's audience, comics, you know, we're all hanging out together, networking, and just having an amazing time.
And I think that's like awesome. I think that's part of the thing is like wanting to see people connect. And like, again, if you guys connect and leads to more shows that you all do, you know, that's the whole point, is to build this like connection and community. And now like people just know like, oh, Raj has a show and he's got a podcast, and then you have someone on and vice versa. Like, I think stuff like that, or you know, they know that you know, do production and they throw you a gig, you know, things like that I think are, you know, invaluable and really, part of the ability for people to connect is so cool. And when we were doing it very early on and people would say like, this is so great. Like, I didn't know there were this many Asian comics, or like, oh, I thought I was the only one, you know, which it's not like we've been doing this since like the late 90s or anything,
Right.
but like, that's how the industry is. That's how far behind we are. But I think like hearing that early on felt really good. And it felt like, oh, cool. We're like, we're building our own little like thing to be able to like compete and put ourselves out there in this good positive way. And then people will go out and like crush on those other shows that's everyone, you know. And then and this is a place to have this for just a second, for just a moment.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, well, we're about to wrap this puppy up.
Hey, that was pretty good. Yeah,
that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any plugs? Anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's Asian Comedy Fest. Like, please, for the love of God, you know. I mean, so our charity partner is Asian American Defense, Legal Defense and Education Fund, ALDEF, aldef.org. And that, you know, all the proceeds for the fest, you know, will go to them. But AsianComedyFest.com is the place you can find tickets. Again, in New York City, it's coming up May 6th through 8th. We have 2 shows a night. They're going to be hot. Raj is on the
6th.
The May 6th, the 9 p.m. show.
The late show.
Yes. That'll be the raunchiest, dirtiest show if you like dirty.
Perfect.
And then we're going to be at, and that's going to be at Sugar Mouse. And then May 27th in LA, we're going to be at Dynasty Typewriter. 2 shows that evening, a 7 and a 9:30. And that's a big one because Margaret Cho is our big headliner on the 7 o'clock one. Being able to tap some of the LA comics has been great, because usually what happens is, you know, we don't really have the funds to be able to fly everyone out.
Right.
And it just so happens if they're in town, you know, great. We try to get them to come on, but it's hard. So now being able to have a base there and having them to come out like opens up the door to some, you know, Fumi's out there, you know, there's a bunch of people that, Dylan's out there now, so there's a bunch of people out there that
Andrea Jin's
out there. Subha, you know Subha,
she's out there. Yeah.
She's out there. So like, there's so many. You know, the 2 coasts are obviously strong. So trying to tap, you know, that talent and be able to do something to have them on, because they're great, and I think it's been real great to be able to do that this year. So. That's it. Asian Comedy Fest. Please come out. You know, that's what I'm plugging.
But yeah, so that's awesome. Definitely go check out the Asian Comedy Festival. It's one of the best times of the summer, and you're not going to regret it. It's going to be awesome. So many fun acts. Not me. Don't come see me.
No, definitely
do not come on the second show. On the first. But so many fun.
He's going to do a bunch of hacky shit.
You know the comic that did like the eyes and the accent. I was talking. It was me. It was actually me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was really awkward. The fact we're having him back is kind of weird.
But yeah, no, Asian Comedy Festival. It's going to be an awesome time. Besides that, I'm doing a half hour at QED on May 8th.
Oh, nice.
Which I'm trying to come to the after party after my set.
Okay.
Right? There's going to be an after party.
Yeah. There'll be after party,
But yeah, half hour at QED on May 8th. So that's going to be fun. I'm co-headlining with Natan Badalov.
Oh, yeah.
How's
he doing?
He's doing great.
Cool.
Yeah, he was in Astoria, but I think he moved to Brooklyn. So
awesome.
Turning into one of those guys.
Oh, well, you know, it's always, there comes a time. It's like retired people moving to Florida, comics moving to Brooklyn. Yeah.
I know. Now he's going to be wearing so many layers when he doesn't need to. But yeah, so that's gonna be fun. And then I think I'm headlining a couple of Don't Tells in Philly at the end of the
nice.
month.
Okay, cool.
That'll also be fun. But yeah, I got road dates with Norman. I got road dates with no, just Norman. Nobody else wants me. But
hey, it's a good person to want you. Well, that's good.
true.
Yeah.
But yeah, catch me on the road. See me here. Definitely check out ACF. Also check out Case 84. When's your next one?
Oh, so I'm actually doing it for like a couple conferences, like a couple like adoptee
Some private
groups.
ones?
Yeah, some more private ones. But once I get some other ones on the book for the public, I'll let you know.
And yeah, dude, thank you so much for being on the show.
This was fun.
I really
Thanks for having me
appreciate
on. This is again, it's been a while since we've gotten to sit down and talk, and I forgot the cameras were here, so this was nice. Yeah,
yeah, this was awesome. Yeah, this reminds me of when we used to hang out like almost every night.
Yeah. Well, now we have to do it for content. So
I
it's
know.
capitalism. That's how it works.
That's fine. Whatever. Hey, whatever gives us an excuse to get together.
Yeah.
But thanks, man.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you on the fest.
Yes.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Bye.